Greg Killer, our senior strategist, to start the program.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it. Welcome everyone. Just setting up one of the things that we want to do is continue the education process as part of Naturally Chicago. One of our goals is to help everyone do well at selling, whether it's to retail, direct to consumer. Most of brands that we're working with have a foothold in direct to consumer, whether that's selling to a farmer's market or to a website or something like that. But we're looking to grow in store and getting, learning is really a key part of it. And to sharing experiences with our Naturally Chicago members is really one of the things that we're all about. And we're really excited to have, three real experienced members from, different categories of the grocery store talking to us today. And we're going to be talking around really four areas around packaging, around retail promotions, around demonstrations, and around retail media. And while each one of these topics individually might be able to be a full, hour webinar, we're going to try and get through all of these and touch on, the key pieces in the course of the next hour. One thing I'm going to start off with before I forget is we do have a Q&A button on the Zoom. If you could put your questions, we will be taking some questions at the end into the Q&A area. We would all really appreciate it. Don't do it in chat for us if you could, please. So first and foremost, let me allow our guests to introduce themselves. Emily, why don't you go first and lead us off, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Groden. I'm the founder and CEO of Evergreen. At Evergreen, we have reinvented the frozen waffle, filling it with more of the things our kids need, like veggies, without any of the junk. We have been in business for about 5.5 years now, launched in 2020. And prior to Evergreen, I was a lawyer. So zero CPG experience jumping into this wild world that we're all a part of.
Very good. Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that last week Emily was featured in Inc. magazine as one of the top business leaders of the year, which is pretty amazing. It's great to be top business in the grocery industry would be pretty amazing, but she's right there alongside Oracle's Larry Ellison and many others. So congratulations, Emily. Pretty
Thank you.
amazing.
Feels a little silly, but thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Luke?
Yeah, hi, I'm Luke Saunders. I'm the founder and CEO of Farmer's Fridge. So if anyone's bought a salad out of a vending machine, chances are we made it and delivered it there. Um, but yeah, that's what we do. Make fresh, healthy food as accessible as a candy bar.
Fantastic.
Perfect. And then I'm Matt Waxman, the co-founder of Kushi Croutons, breadcrumbs, and panko breadcrumbs rather, and stuffing. And we launched in 2022. And really, we're kind of disrupting these stale pantry categories. So use the word stale once. That I'm only allowed once per my brother and co-founder to say that each meeting. So again, really bringing some better for you attributes to categories that really just had a lot of legacy brands missing some of the things that the more contemporary shoppers are looking for. And prior to this, I was pretty deep in CPG. I was a brand manager at Kraft Heinz for about 8, 9 years. So
Yeah, I've got some craft in my background, so we won't hold that against us either. So, well, let's get into the first area of packaging. So, Luke, why don't you start us off? Like, why is packaging so critically important?
Yeah, I mean, I packaging, I think everybody hopefully knows why it's so important, but particularly in retail where it serves multiple functions, right? Like it's the billboard on the shelf that has to like start by getting someone interested to examine your product. Um, then, it has to message the attributes. So like, why would you buy this over something else? And then, it can provide details for, somebody who buys it and think of like reading the back of the cereal box with your kids at like engagement. So you've got your whole customer funnel in one little thing on the shelf in a retail setting. In our case, I got kind of fortunate in that nothing else worked. So I got desperate and tried a jar at the suggestion of my brother-in-law, actually. And it vends really well and it keeps the food really fresh. It looks great and very differentiated. So we kind of fell into that at the beginning of the brand, but it helped me really understand like what is the important elements of packaging. And so for us, one thing we always try to do is have the packaging be differentiated. It's like when we launched sandwiches, there was a lot of back and forth because we tried, if anyone's familiar with like those triangle sandwich packs that are everywhere. And what we found is like there's sort of a consumer element where they look at the sandwich and it's in a triangle pack and they average that out with every triangle pack sandwich they've ever had, and automatically it's lower quality. So we put a lot of time into thinking, how do we repackage the sandwich in a way that would actually differentiate it on the shelf, both in our vending machine or in like a Hudson newsstand where they have those triangle sandwiches, and actually design that packaging from scratch. So that's something we really think about is like, how do you break the mental model for what this should be in? But then you have to consider all the form factors that matter, like how much space does it take up? Is it going to mess up your spacing on the shelf or other things that make it too expensive? The second is like, what is the thing you want customers to know most about your product? And so in our case, like it's every time we did a survey, the thing that people were looking at was the actual food and deciding if like the lettuce was wilted or the avocados were still green. So obviously for us, like as much of the packaging that can be clear as possible is critical because people actually have to see the food to make a purchasing decision. So for some brands that might be an attribute or a picture. For us, it's very simple. Like I want as much of the food to be showing as possible. Um, and then the last piece is sort of like key messaging that you need on there, whether that's like a regulatory requirement or a description of what's actually in like, ingredients would be regulatory, but you also have to like tell people what they're buying. So we kind of balance all three of those factors before we make a decision about packaging, and it's served us really well over the years.
So, Emily and Matt, well, the key piece for Luke is the packaging to see the product. What are the key things you're trying to communicate with your packaging?
I guess in our category, right, because we're really the first mainstream better for you product, we really had to communicate some of those kind of classic BFY attributes. So for the first non-GMO project verified, right? So I wanted that non-GMO bug to be right on there. We're the first sourdough breadcrumb, first sourdough in each of our categories, actually. So croutons, breadcrumbs, and stuffing. So that had to be prominent. And I know we'll probably touch on this after, but we definitely got a lot of learnings as we were in market and made some updates to make some of those reasons to believe or those points of differentiation even more clear. Just because, it's hard to know what you don't know until you start seeing consumers react. So one thing we've always done for testing is like, I'll just always print out because you're so used to, I'm sure my fellow founders here, like you're so used to looking at pack design iterations on a screen. I would always just like print it out at FedEx to scale and then slap it on our bag or put it around our canister, put it on the shelf because it looks so different once you're framed by your competition. Plus, what is inevitably crappy lighting, or as soon as your first product is grabbed, you're then a foot back, and then can you see anything from that angle, right? So some of those things were really helpful, and we had a lot of learnings across the board. But for the most part, it was those better for you attributes and really just looking different. So because we're the first like emerging brand in our category, we had to stand out, right? Without the big marketing budgets, a lot of times us startup-y folks, the packaging is the way we can disrupt the shelf, and that's we're telling a buyer we're disrupting the category. So the packaging is really the first thing that we look to disrupt with. Every crouton, for example, in the category had a salad on it. We're the only one without a salad. And that was because our thought was you don't need to be reminded that you can put a crouton on a salad. We went to show, high detailed photography of how quality our product is with oven browning and things like that. So similar to Luke, it was how can I show that my product is better? For us, it's not clear, but it's the visual of the packaging and then screaming those better for you attributes to kind of distance myself from what people are used to seeing in this category.
Right.
I brought some show and tell to hit home and affirm a lot of the points that have already been made. But so this is our zucchini carrot cake packaging today. We did a major rebrand in January of 2024. This was our zucchini carrot cake packaging before that rebrand. The week that our redesigned packaging started to hit shelves, our velocities jumped 62% overnight. So packaging is really powerful. The reason we did the rebrand, and obviously when you're doing something that expensive and that risky, there has to be good reasons driving it. But the reason that we did it was we realized from talking to a lot of consumers, and we actually used Expo West in 2023 as like a really scrappy way to interview a lot of people. We learned that the original packaging was not communicating what we wanted to communicate. And by that, I mean, with the green letters and the white background, we were emphasizing the healthiness, the better for you, but like too much, right? It's important to call out, the attributes that make your product better for you for sure in this world. I totally agree, Matt. But like that's all we were calling out. And so people were looking at the packaging and thinking like those can't possibly be good. And in a category like waffles should be warm and nostalgic and feel like a big hug in the morning. And our packaging definitely was not communicating that. So when we went to rebrand, we wanted to make sure that we emphasize the warmth and like the emotional response that our first iteration definitely did not do. And then the other thing, similar to what Matt was saying, is we needed to stand out on shelf. We were entering into this huge category with these legacy behemoth players that, by the way, were all behind like frosted freezer doors. And so a white package blended in not only with the frost on the freezer doors, but all of the better for you players at the time. And so we wanted to take the opposite tact and go like as obnoxiously bright as humanly possible so that when consumers were walking down the aisle and their eyes glanced at the freezer section, they could not ignore our products. So that was the reason.
So I was pre-call talking with Luke, and he is the only brand that I've ever worked with that found the right packaging right up front. And so congratulations. But packaging changes are hard and expensive. Talk us through kind of at what point is like that tipping point. Matt, if you could talk we talked a little bit about, some of those costs and the expense. It's not an easy thing to do. So what was that tipping point thing that said, hey, we got to do it now?
Yeah, I think oftentimes the cost can vary significantly based on the format of packaging you have, right? So if you're very early on, a lot of brands, if you're in a stand-up pouch, for example, and you're doing small runs, you tend to have to go digital. There's no cost to change artwork typically with a digital print. But when you're a little bit larger and scaling up and you have flexo printing or all these things, there's quite expensive plate charges. So that's where it becomes this decision point. And for us, we just had learned enough about, like, we kind of waited. If we had one small adjustment, we said, let's wait till we make the next change. But we had enough of those little kind of critical points that added up where we said, we've now launched 3 products. We had made some of the adjustments already when we launched breadcrumbs 2 years after croutons. So croutons was a little behind. And we just saw that there was enough things to kind of distill the messaging on pack from some of the learnings, right? I think when you launch, you sometimes get so excited to scream all of your points of differentiation. But to Emily's point and Luke's, you got to learn like what are those things that consumers really are motivated by to purchase and repeat. And we just learned there was enough of these things to distill. Like it wasn't easy, but we had a mascot on the front. My designer fought me on it, and he was right. We had to pull him off the front because it was distracting from the communication hierarchy of the brand name, the flavor, things like that. So I think for us, it was just we learned enough of these little insights from consumers that it was time to make the change. And the funny part was, packaging was the first thing that buyers would say, oh, I love the packaging because not only does it have those better for you attributes, but to Emily's point, we had to stand out. The category is so sleepy that we put all these bright colors, and instead of showing the salad, we have these it's like a Matisse leaf cutouts of the salad print in the background. It was something we always heard was so great. And yet now that we've made some of these adjustments, I can't even believe I liked our old one because some of these adjustments felt so low hanging and have been so helpful. To Emily's point, I immediately saw online like click-throughs increased on the new packaging as soon as I had that render up there. So there was enough of those data points where we said now's the time to make the change. And to Emily's point, sounds like that lift more than made up for whatever plate changes you might have had to eat at the time.
Yeah, it's wonderful stuff. We probably could spend another 30 minutes on packaging, but one of the other key components of selling at retail, I remember back in my Frontera days, if I'm presenting to a new retailer, probably the first question or one of the first questions they would ask are, how are you going to support your product at retail? How are you going to support me? And that's a question that I think most brands, when they're presenting for the first time, get. What's your thoughts on how brands should be answering that question or prepared to answer that question?
Anyone in particular or open?
Go. No, no, open.
Yeah, I think it's important to just one, make sure you start by saying we're going to support the category aggressively, right? They like to hear that from the onset. And then obviously you want to kind of put your money where your mouth is to some extent. So for us, just N of one, and I know I've heard this from other brands, but in-store retail, so TPRs and promotion is often the most immediate way, especially for a smaller brand when you're not going to be spending on huge campaigns out of the store, right? At minimum, you want to try to grab people at the point of sale, the lowest point on the funnel. So really aggressive promo is super helpful for us, especially being the first better for you brand. We know we have high repeat rates when someone tries it because of the quality and all of that stuff, but you kind of have to get them initially. So regardless of dropping down on price, it's just that sale tag alone to just wave your hand around in the aisle and catch someone's attention was super important. So for us, it was really being aggressive in a category that didn't have a ton of promotion. So that was another way for us to say we're disruptive of, hey, we want to do a BOGO or partner with you to get display. And sometimes we were able to get really costly in-store promotion vehicles like a display or an end cap, not by paying for the end cap, the standard fee, because we couldn't afford, the $20,000 fee at Meijer or something like that. But by going aggressive on promo, we'd sometimes have managers or even the buyer would say, oh, I see you're supporting this with a BOGO. I'll give you a discount on the ad and I'll give you free display or something like that. So we're always just looking to be scrappy and support really aggressively with TPRs and then ask for whatever we can on top of that as like added value.
Yeah, I agree that most important is that you let retailers know that, they're leaning into you and taking a chance on you, putting you on their shelf. You're going to lean back into them. Promos are one very easy, low lift way to do that. And also, by the way, really effective. People really do try new products when they're on promo. And so ideally, when you are looking at your sales data, you see a big spike during a promo period, and then your new baseline ends up being higher. So it ends up just kind of being a stair step up and to the right at that retailer. I think one thing to show sophistication when you're talking to retailers is understand that different retailers like to see different types of promo plans, right? There are certain retailers out there who love their BOGOs, and there are certain retailers out there who demand 16 weeks a year, and everybody has their own kind of nuances. And if you can walk into a retailer meeting and say, like, I know you like your BOGOs, and so here's what I'm going to give to you, I think that goes a long way and gives that buyer a lot of confidence that you know what you're doing. The other thing I would say is different types of, and this is kind of related, but different types of promotions do better at different retailers too. And so anything you can do to understand, like, is a BOGO really doing the most work, or could I get away with like a buy one, get one half off here? We rely on our broker partners to give us that information based on what they're seeing with their other brands. They are, the retailer subject matter experts. But, really getting smart and sophisticated, not just on like, okay, let's do a promotion, but what that retailer wants and what works best at that retailer.
And then how do you measure those results? I guess that's kind of the, uh, you can go BOGO, you can go 50 cents off. How do you figure out what's right for you for Evergreen?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your trade spend budget is, of course. So we always submit promo plans that stay within our trade spend budget, which is very clearly laid out for the year. But we test and learn. So when we launch at a new retailer, we never do the same type of promotion one after another. You know, we might start with a $1 off TPR and then do a $2 off TPR and then maybe try a real short BOGO and then maybe try a buy one, get one half off. And we look at the relative lifts for the each type of investment and make decisions based on what we've seen. But you do definitely want to test and see what, again, works for your brand. It's also different by category, right? So it's really specific. What works for your brand, what works for your category, what works for that retailer.
And one note to add to that point, because I know starting out data can be the
Mm.
like big question mark where you go, how do I even observe that? One thing that's been helpful, assuming you're at this point in a distributor, let's say with a KeHE or UNFI, assuming you don't have necessarily IRI access or Circana to get scan data, shipments are a very good proxy, especially over time for movement, right? So you might see it varies a little bit differently from what the scan would be. So for a March promo, you'll see a bump, in February for the shipments potentially. But over the long run, you can start to see like Emily mentioned, that baseline and how it fluctuates based on different promos. So even without scan data, you should be able to get a pretty good clue of if you're moving in that right direction based on shipments. And then the nice thing now, more and more retailers are opening up their scan data. Like Whole Foods has done it for years. Sprouts did it last year. Fresh Time is now rolling out a new platform where you can look at in-store sales by store and things like that. So I think it's nice to see that wall getting broken a little bit to give brands more access because it only helps everyone, right? When you know what promos work most effectively.
Luke, within the refrigerated section, how are you approaching promotions?
Um, we don't really do them. It's not a thing. And so there's a few times when we've tested like, a tag or something to give a promotion. Um, but yeah, I was just thinking like for us, a lot of our investment is like we go to most of the stores that we're in. And if it's somewhere we don't go, we want to make sure that they got our food all the way to the shelf. So it's a lot of like on the ground, making sure that the food is in stock is really our biggest lever. Like if everything is available to purchase all of the time, we have very positive trial and repeat rates. But like if you show up and your salad's out of stock, it interrupts that whole frequency funnel. And if the shelf gets too low, people don't even try to begin with because it just sends a negative signal. So for us, like a lot of our effort goes into that. We've recently partnered with retailers like Walmart that have really good online search-based um, purchasing option, like to drive purchasing through online, and that has been very effective. But like we will typically play with the price point more than anything to say, okay, this is the steady state price needs to be lower, and we're looking at does the velocity increase offset the margin we lost on a per unit basis. I think just kind of going back to the original question is it's easy to go into a meeting and say, I'm going to support this so much, right? Like, of course you are. You want your business to be successful, but the amount of effort that goes into that, it really is like by product, by category, by retailer. We've experienced so many different approaches to this. And I think for us, it was more of a surprise because we started in the fridge business. We didn't even add the retail business until several years in, and you're like, oh man, you got to like optimize this shelf at every retailer in a different way. And just being cognizant of what Emily said around like backing into what your budget needs to be to make the like to actually have your business work. And then you're just continuously hammering there's 100 different levers you can pull. It's going to be different for your product you buy retailer. So just figuring out like what's your test and learn approach to that bucket of spend, but like having it be a budget that you have to hit. And we've had cases where like we make the program work but it's too expensive to drive the volume, and we're just like this isn't mathematically a great outcome. So you have to be open to that too when you're talking about with them. It's like, here's my budget, I'm going to figure this out for you, is a great way to walk into a meeting. But it's a lot of work to do that exercise. It's not like you can hear it from Emily and Matt. They've tested all kinds of things over the years and come up with the formula that works well for them.
Yeah, I think that, as I recall back to some of these questions, I think one of them is the question, how are you going to promote is, do you understand us, the retailer? And to Emily's point, that's really the first thing. You've got to be able to, if you're coming out a new brand, you're new to them, you're going to be replacing somebody else. Do you understand how we work? Is really question one. And then, the second part of it, I think you've all said very different things. Emily, you're talking BOGOs and Matt's, and we're talking a couple of cents. You've got to test and test and test and figure out what works for you and what's effective and what drives it. And it may be, on one of our lines, we did very small, very frequent promotions, and one we had to go deep. It's a test and learn process. And, there is no, magic formula, I guess, is what we're all kind of saying.
And Greg, if I could add a third
Please.
layer to that one, I think what's funny, you can plan as best as like you can, you make all these learnings. The execution oftentimes is like potentially underlooked, especially when you're a smaller brand and you go, oh, great. Like I finished my TPR plans for these 20 accounts. My brokers have it. That's it. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, right, you have to pester your brokers or sales folks, whatever it is, multiple times to ensure the promotion was submitted. It was logged on the right side by KeHE or the distributor, that there's planned demand. If you're doing a BOGO at Publix, right? Like you got to make sure then that there's inventory in that DC to support the promo. Otherwise, the tag could be on shelf and there's nothing there, right? So you do all the planning, but I think what we found, and this is where as we've scaled, having more eyes on the execution has been incredibly important and makes the huge difference, just because sometimes we'll do everything right and then the tag's not there because someone at KeHE forgot something, right? So it's especially at your biggest accounts, really making sure that the whole like supply chain, how the tag gets executed is kind of checked, I think has been huge for us to kind of recognize and start to cut down on some of those missed promo executions.
And to Luke's point, being on shelf, you got to be
Helps, yeah.
there. It sounds pretty basic, but you need to do it. Um, Move on a little bit to demonstrations. Um, Emily, demos have been a big part of the evergreen strategy. Help us understand how and why that's a big piece of the evergreen go-to-market plan.
Well, just to transition from Matt's comment just now, we use demos for a lot of different things. Obviously, first and foremost, to drive trial and purchase, but also as eyes on the ground. We do demos with our own brand ambassadors. So these are folks who we have, trained, hired, hired and trained ourselves. They are very passionate about our brand. They are highly educated about our brand. They do an excellent job selling, but we also ask them to go like one step further and give us feedback about merchandising. Are we on shelf? How does it look? As well as feedback from the consumer too. They stand there, they're a really valuable asset in store, and they ask questions about what the consumers think, and they give us that feedback too. So yeah, we do about 1,000 demos at Whole Foods alone a year. So we do a ton of demos. We demo throughout the natural channel, so not just Whole Foods. We don't really demo outside of natural, and that is, again, we're talking about a lot of like nuances in this world. One of the nuances that we've learned is that the natural channel consumer is much more open to demos than the conventional consumer. They are more likely to stop. They are more likely to be there for like a leisurely shopping experience. But then you can like double click even further and go by region. So we don't demo in Manhattan, for example, because the Manhattan shopper always has their AirPods on and they have no interest in stopping and trying your product. So nuances everywhere. This world is complicated and layered for sure. But yeah, we do a ton of demos in natural. We have found that by hiring our own brand ambassadors, yes, that is a lot of hard work and legwork on the front end, but it pays dividends on the back end, both because, like I said, these people are really passionate about your product and do a really good job selling it and explaining it and educating people. But it's also a lot cheaper because you're not paying an expensive demo company to do it. And therefore, the ROAS has always been there for us. We see lasting lift in regions where we have our best brand ambassadors. We had a woman in the North Atlantic region of Whole Foods that demoed for us for years. And it has always been our strongest region of Whole Foods. And I swear, and like her stores have always been our strongest stores. She hasn't demoed for us for years. And so I swear it is the lasting impact of Nancy. Nancy was amazing. So if you can figure out, how to get a few brand ambassadors out there, how to train them up on your product, how to get them into the right channel, the right regions, the right doors to do demos, I think it can be hugely valuable. For us, we really believe, we're a new player in a concentrated category. And so we just felt it was really important to get as many waffles and mouths as we could. And we knew that as soon as people tried it, they love it. And that has played out. So demos is kind of one of our core pillars when we're talking to natural channel retailers, that we always say we're gonna, throw support behind them through demos. We don't say it for conventional or mass.
Yeah. So Matt and Luke, demos have not been, typically part of your strategy. Thoughts there? Why is that?
I think, Luke, do you want to take it? Or
No, you go first. Go ahead.
I think for us, it was just one of those similar to Emily, like as Emily mentioned earlier, just testing, right? So we did some initial tests and just found that the return wasn't necessarily there for us. Part of it could be a difference, right? Like depending on your category, pantry is a little bit slower mover sometimes than frozen, or if you're in snacks, right? You might stand to have a much higher return from someone who buys your snack and repeats than someone who's buying breadcrumbs every couple months or something like that. But funny enough, again, we're always open to learning from some of my prep and, talking to Emily on the success she's seen in demos. I'm going to revisit that now that, a lot of my testing was done 3 years ago when we were a newer brand. I might see a difference now in testing at some of the premier accounts where, again, your bang for your buck's going to go further, like at Whole Foods, where maybe I do 100 stores and test and kind of see how those returns look. Because I think to Emily's point, not only is there the return, but there's also a strategic standpoint in terms of which retailers you might be demoing at, right? So I might be willing to do it at Whole Foods because that's good marketing for me, given that so many Whole Food shoppers cross shop at a Jewel Osco and a Mariano's and other accounts and things like that. So it's actually something I'm going to be revisiting now. So thank you, Emily.
And I think for us, I mean, in the retail channel, this is just such an expensive tactic, like these guys have said, that like I have to believe I'm going to sell so much more food, and it's a tough product to sample. So you like have to break it down and like put it into jars. And so the variance that you'd normally have between Nancy and like an average person and the worst person becomes even more magnified. So it hasn't been as big, and we're not in Whole Foods, but in Costco it worked really well. So like whenever we've done rotations in there, like they have so much traffic and they've conditioned their shoppers to want this trial. And so like we saw very clear, like, okay, we're spending X amount of money, but look at how much a lift we got. So it's really easy to justify. So I just think it's more of an ROI question, and also thinking about your product, like how differentiated is the flavor or the taste, or how much of a hurdle is that for people? Because like if is this going to get them over that, and then the ROI could be higher.
Yeah. I'll just add a quick Frontera point in here as well. One of the things that, as we were launching the brand, all of the partners were out doing demonstrations, really to a lot of what Emily was saying, to get feedback on what was out there, what they were thinking, and it really helped us both from a packaging standpoint. Are we communicating? When you can ask consumers questions in store, and one of the things that I'll just put out there is, as brands continue to grow, the CEOs get further away from the customer. And the further you get away, the harder it is to get that direct feedback. you certainly have brokers, you have other people out there, but getting that direct feedback can often do a really good job at directing the things that need to be fixed, whether it's in packaging, whether it's the pricing, whether it's promotion, whatever, all those levers are, hearing what consumers have to say. And I think that's one of the things that we all yearn for, is that information so that we can make good decisions.
And yeah, Greg, I'd be remiss if I didn't add to your point. I did probably 400 demos myself in the first year in market, and that was entirely the reason we were able to make some of these adjustments on pack, or sodium or salt or the seasoning, some things like that. Those tweaks early on when you're just kind of getting your proof of concept. I would measure it, almost gamify it, and I'd see how many I could sell at like my rotation of 12 different Marianos. And I found Ukrainian Village, I set a record with like 50 bags, and it became an exercise for me to see how I could outsell, myself. But then also that's how I would hear from consumers early on when I had stickers on my pack before I was even printing bags, and I was able to kind of make those adjustments. So it's a good point there where it might have a strategic purpose outside of just moving units as well.
Yeah, but that's like you doing it, right? It's not the demos are like a scaled version where you send
Yeah,
people.
that's why we
Field.
stopped at
Right.
thousands of stores. It's a
Well,
tough
like
investment.
I do the same thing. Like you're in front of a fridge, you're talking to every customer, like that, I think is critical. So it would almost be another pillar of success in a consumer brand. It's just you got to be talking to customers all the time.
Got to be talking to customers, and it's really such a critical thing. And it doesn't matter what stage of the business you're at. You got to get out into stores and see what it is. It's just such a big piece of the business, and I think we're all double down on that. Get out in stores, see people, talk to them.
Talk to
And some
managers too, like a local manager, even at a large chain. I found Whole Foods ATLs and TLs, the assistant team leads and team leads are like their term for manager. Those folks are an unbelievable like resource in terms of understanding what merchandising is on and off limits, or what's already allocated to a national plan. And maybe you could sneak in and get some added display somewhere when you do a hot promo or something like that. They're also able to tell you how something merchandises, right? So when I was exploring some pack formats, I would ask my Fresh Time, shout out Paul at the Elston Fresh Time. I see him all the time in my normal shop, and I ask him, do you think this would fit well here? What do you think of this innovation? And those guys are so close to the consumer because they're talking to them every day and putting out the merchandising, executing, the plans that they get from corporate. I would get a ton of feedback from folks like that. So again, just managers are another helpful resource in that in-store kind of piece.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, moving on here, retail media is kind of the last subject that we'll touch on today. It's been 10 years since I've been on the brand side of this business. And when you talk about a world that's totally changed, this whole area was really just starting to evolve. So, Emily, why don't you, if you could, lead us off by clarifying what is meant by retail media and give us a little intro and primer to this, if you could, please.
Yeah, I mean, at the most basic level, retail media is when if you go on Instacart, for example, and you search frozen waffles, you might see, hopefully, you'll see Evergreen return first. And there'll be like a little gray box that says sponsored within our product listing. Retail media is you bid, right, on search terms such that, and if you win that bid, your product is returned first when folks are searching for your category or other brands in your category. And the idea is it gets your product in front of people's eyes and gets you exposure and hopefully then drives trial and purchase. I love retail media. This is it probably our most important lever right now from the marketing side. I love it for a bunch of reasons, one of which it's so measurable, right? Like exactly what your ROAS is, exactly how many dollars you sell for every dollar that you put in. And so it's easy to justify. I also, it is kind of online sales are becoming more and more important to a lot of our big retailer partners. It is a big focus for folks like Walmart and for Target and for Whole Foods. And so to be able to show your buyers at those places that you've cracked that code earns you big time brownie points. A lot of those buyers view the online shopper as incremental to the in-store shopper. And so the buyer views getting those online dollars as expanding the category. And so, we've really invested in it and seen a lot of success. The other reason the retail media is great is you can start really small. Like you can just throw a few dollars a day at it. And that's how we started. We literally, I think, started at $10 a day and saw, a really positive ROAS. And so slowly creeped up. You can also start doing it yourself. We initially managed our retail media budget. Now we work with an agency who does it for us. But so there's like really low barriers to entry. So highly recommend kind of playing around with retail media. Obviously, Instacart's a big one. Whole Foods has its own platform. A lot of retailers have their own platforms. So there are a lot of different platforms out there to explore, but try it.
Luke, has it been a big part of your business as well?
Definitely with Walmart. We don't use the other platforms as much. We're now setting it up for Target based on the success we've had at Walmart, but everything Emily said, like it's measurable, it's high ROAS. It really does work, and it's where everything is going. So, I strongly recommend like getting in there and testing it, trying it out, understanding how those tools work.
And Matt, does success in the online world translate into retail opportunities for you?
I would say yes, especially when you're thinking about retail media. Just at the end of the day, when buyers are looking at their numbers, the retail media feeds velocity no differently, right? There's 5 purchases in store scan is the same thing as 5 bought via Instacart online, right? So at the end of the day, you're still feeding the ultimate measure that matters on sales. And I think what's so important about it is, especially within the kind of naturally network audience, and hopefully I would assume the folks on this call, as an emerging brand, naturally the higher income natural shopper is someone that is on shopping these platforms, right? You're paying for convenience with something like Instacart or Walmart or Target.com. So it's a place where you have an outsized ability to actually speak to your core shopper. So to Emily's point, she wants her waffles to show up besides, in front of some of those big name legacy brands that we're all familiar with. That's the shopper she wants to hit. So again, in terms of like putting your money where your mouth is, when you're telling a retailer, we're going to be disruptive, we're going to bring incremental shoppers, you winning that online channel is one of your lowest hanging fruits to actually drive those sales forward. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather show up first online. That's going to do more for me than just even a small tag sometimes for a TPR during the same period when everyone else is on TPR in retail.
That's such
Yeah.
an interesting point.
Yeah, and I was gonna say most of like the retailers that I talk to, like Walmart in particular, they have a very specific goal at the senior leadership level to be at like 50% market share of online grocery. And I think they're, 25% today. And so if you're showing them that like 70% of your sales are online, you're helping like not necessarily your buyer. So I think that's one thing for people to understand. Like it's a good talking point with a buyer. They just care about overall velocity. But some of the strategic initiatives that are getting pushed more senior at these companies are like the future is online. So I want more brands that are doing better online, period. So they might even put up with like lower velocities in store and otherwise because they see where the online penetration's going and they want to lean into that.
I've actually been told that explicitly, like, here's your velocity goal, but if you were to do this in online, pickup and delivery, then that goal could be lower. The last point on retail media, just and to bring this back full circle to the first topic, which was packaging and shelf presence, tie it with a nice little bow, is don't forget that like your retail media listings are another product brand billboard for you. And so, one of the first things we do when we're launching in a new retailer is making sure like our online listings on that retail media platform look great. Something we just started doing, which I'm very excited about, is swapping in and out our imagery by season and by holiday. So like we just put in on Walmart, for example, and on Target, like holiday imagery on our listings because it's just another way to grab a shopper's attention and to get your name out there and for, to continue building that brand awareness. So don't sleep on your listings. It's important to make sure that those are, looking really good.
Talk a little bit more, anyone here on how you got into it. Emily, you said you started doing it yourself and then you found an outsourced team. Did it just become too much work or, Matt, how are you doing it? Are you doing it all yourself or how is that working?
I'm right now at the exact point that Emily mentioned she was a while back. Sorry, one second.
Get choked
There we
up
go.
with these
My
questions.
singing voice is back. I've been managing it with an Instacart rep, so I have some familiarity with the space because I managed kind of larger digital media buckets at Kraft. So I knew enough about the space early on as we were learning, where I have an Instacart rep that's incredibly helpful, and we were able to, do what we could across the board. I think now we're launching in so many new retailers next year as well, where clearly there's efficiencies to going to what's called on Instacart a manual campaign is really how you could maximize your ROASs. The problem is, as a founder, I can't execute a manual campaign. These agencies have, AI tools and all these different things that they're able to optimize their bids for. So the nice thing, to Emily's point, early on, you could do it yourself. You set up what's called like an optimized campaign where the Instacart algorithm will do what it does and you can get, pretty efficient returns there. But I think as we're looking to scale, it was clear I did, very simple back of the envelope math of if my ROAS goes from X to X, I'm more than paying for my agency at that point. And a lot of agencies will have some level of a variable spend. So it's not always a huge fixed retainer or something like that. So we're making that jump now, literally this month.
And with focusing back to Walmart, they're just such a huge animal, Luke. How have you managed that? Or is there a specific Walmart team, or is it just how are you managing that online presence?
Yeah, we're a little unique in that we don't do marketing really. So we had to be like, oh, there's not like someone on the team I can be like, hey, go run this search platform because we don't do that. There'd be like a science project. So if I had done this earlier in the life cycle, that would have been the same for me as it was for Emily and Matt. Like I would just figure it out and then like try to hand it off if it's working. But in our case, launching Walmart and sort of retail in general is only 20% of our business. We chose to go with an outsourced firm. And for Walmart at least, there's a firm that most of the brands that I talk to work with called Blue Rise. That's just easy, and they do everything, and they charge us a flat fee, and then we decide what our budget is. They kind of give us input. So I think if you're in like one retailer just getting started, you kind of play with it yourself to understand how these tools work. But there's plenty of outsourced options for when you reach that point.
And sometimes
And
I've seen that on Instacart while I was doing it myself, we have specific broker partners that focus on certain large accounts. So while we have cross coverage and independence in a lot of accounts with, more centralized broker, our target broker, for example, we have one company that just does target for us. They have an in-house media team that's super savvy in target.com, right? So I've used them, or similar to Luke, he had someone for Walmart. You might have someone else for Instacart. So it kind of depends on who your current partner ecosystem is. And you might find that some folks specialize in it better than others.
and doing a little bit of research, this is such a big and growing part of it. FMI was estimating that last year, 12% of groceries purchased through retail, the consumer never entered the store. This year, they're expecting it to be 15%. By 27, they expect it to be over 25%. So, like, if we got to watch the trends because they mean something, and therefore, this area that we're talking about last, is going to be a big and increasingly bigger portion of all of our time as we, look to grow brands in this retail space. So, with that, I think we've got a couple of quick Naturally Chicago ads, and then we've got two questions that I'm going to bounce back to. So, Joan, if you can put
Greg,
up
I'm
our.
just got, we had some technical difficulty with the slides, so I'm just going to jump in with the plug.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, for sure. First, join Naturally Chicago as a brand member today. It's the best way for brands to really utilize all the benefits of participating with Naturally Chicago, the trade association for the natural products industry in Chicago. You get free discounted online programs and live events, members-only events and programs, peer engagement across the natural products industry, and curated introductions to leading retailers. And Greg Keller is the man you want to talk to about this. So make sure to give Greg a shout. It's just Greg at naturallychicago.org. And this is a wrap for our ambitious webinar series for this year. We're kicking off our ambitious series for next year with a webinar on January 13th, and it's on regulatory and litigation trends in the food, beverage, dietary supplement, and cosmetic industries. These kind of issues are not first of mind for most businesses, for most entrepreneurs, because they're so busy with the nuts and bolts of their businesses. But regulatory and litigation issues can cause some really existential problems for businesses. So we urge you to join us. It's another free webinar on Tuesday, January 13th. Back to you, Greg.
Thanks. Yeah, that regulatory thing. There's no one on this, who's been in business for more than 10 years that hasn't found tripped up somewhere along the line. So it's probably a good thing to listen to. So one of the questions that we got dealt with the first subject, and that's around your hierarchy on the packaging. What are the things you're thinking about first? What are the things you're communicating first? Emily, you talked a little bit about your change in that. How do you think through the hierarchy on your packaging?
We think about a couple things. One, kind of what is most important to our consumer. You look at the world today, people care a lot about protein. We've got protein on the front of our packaging. And then second, I would say is kind of what stands you apart from the rest of your competitors, what makes you differentiated in your space. I think one of the mistakes that we made early on with our kind of original packaging was our messaging was just kind of, well, first of all, we had too many call outs in front of pack, but second of all, it was just kind of like, we're the healthiest frozen waffle out there. We're the cleanest label frozen waffle out there. But everybody else in the natural channel is saying that, whether or not it's true. And so really honing in on what makes us different. For us, that's our veggie content. And so the only two call outs we have right now in front of pack for our thick and fluffy waffles, which just launched this year, are hidden veggies and our protein.
Right. Luke, how do you think about that?
I mean, I think this is why I got so lucky on the packaging redesign is like it's clear packaging. So we just keep removing stuff from the label because that says everything you need to know. It's like this is fruits and vegetables. They're fresh. Like let the food speak for itself. So for us, it's like how do I keep taking stuff off of there and even things that are totally counterintuitive, like to save money, we stopped printing our logo on some of the smaller jars, and literally saw no change in sales. So it's like just the less I have on there, the better, turns out.
All right. The last question that we've got probably is one that might have been added to this, but it has to deal with your suggested retail price, the price that you're out at every single day. How do you decide that?
I think that's, I mean, I think early on, right, you're going to want to get in front of consumers. So we actually started in the farmer's market, right, which is not exactly the best environment to gauge someone's price sensitivity since someone's paying $9 for beets or something. But I think it was helpful to just hear a general willingness to pay for things. Then as we obviously migrated to stores, we really just studied the category, right? I think that's been a constant theme throughout a lot of this. It's really understand your competition. So if me, in my case, I'm trying to position my brand as a premium and there's a cost justification for it, I'm looking at where can I be within the category where I still think I'm approachable, right? And I think my packaging and product warrant the premium that I'm charging. But at the same time, you have to make sure that it makes sense for your P&L, right? So there's two things. It's one, how far can you stretch in market based on the competition? And then what is a consumer willing to pay? And then your P&L, right? If you think you have to be an X price in market, but your P&L doesn't allow for it, getting some of those pieces accounted for early on are helpful because it might be that you have to give up that premium oil that you have in there if you think the $4.99 price point being below $5 is going to ultimately have more success or bring about more success than that oil is going to get you.
I mean, just on our end as a reference point, like we use the fridges for a lot of testing on this and see a lot of variability on pricing at different types of fridges and geographies. But in Walmart, we reduced our price by $1 on like a handful of items, and we saw 100% increase in velocity. So going from like $8 to $7 was 100% change in the velocity of products. Like that's how important pricing is. And I think you said it well, Matt, like work backwards. Like you have to get the price right with consumers and then figure out how to build a product that meets the margin goals. But the price is probably the biggest thing we didn't talk about today. Like if your price is wrong, you're never going to sell anything.
And it might lead to some very hard decisions, right? If you have to give up that premium chicken in one of your items or something like that, those are some of the things you have to consider. And it's certainly easier to test early on while you have your more fluid retailer landscape and UPCs and things like that than when you're in 5,000 stores and you learn the hard way that, X price went up and now you have a real tough position you're in.
Yeah, I think I'll close this out just with a comment from our first buyer at Jewel, Jim Seidler. And he was like, hey, you guys could probably sell Frontera at $10 a jar and you'll sell some. But the closer you are to pace, the more you're going to sell. And so it is that balancing act. The closer you are to that mainstream leader, the more you're going to sell. But you can't, because we're typically premium products, it's really hard to get there. So anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us. Emily, Matt, Luke, thank you so much for your insights and time here. We appreciate you all. Everybody have a wonderful holiday, and we'll look forward to seeing you again early in the next year. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.